Since the war in Gaza started, Houthi rebels have attacked ships.
The Houthis launched anti-ship ballistic missiles and crewed drones at the American warships. None were successful and all were shot down.
The first bombs fell before sunrise. By sunset, Yemen's Ras Isa port, a working civilian facility, was a burning tomb.
A brutal series of US airstrikes kills tens and injures more at Yemen's Ras Isa oil port. The death toll is high and will get higher.
Operation Rough Rider, President Trump's brutal answer to a world gone quiet under Biden, has left 74 dead, hundreds wounded, and an empire of oil and blood reduced to ash in one single night. And unfortunately, this was just the beginning.
US airstrikes pound Yemen in the deadliest attack on the country since President Trump started bombing Houthi rebels a month ago.
They called it victory, a warning, a message to the Houthis and Tehran.
From President Trump's lengthy statement on Truth Social, he had a message to the Houthis. It says, quote, "Your time is up and your attacks must stop starting today. If they don't, hell will rain down upon you like never before."
But behind the roaring headlines, a darker truth festered. Ballistic missiles lighting up the night sky, warships dodging death in waters once ruled by commerce, innocents buried beneath headlines, a region ignited, not in hope, but in vengeance. Tonight, we expose the deadly truth behind Operation Rough Rider and the brutal game that could change the Middle East forever.
The attack happened on Thursday, and most of the pictures from it are too graphic to show. It is clear from this that the battle in Yemen is intensifying.
Born from Yemen's brutal civil war, the Houthis rose to power in 2014, seizing the capital, Sana'a, with violence and bloodshed. Backed by Iran, they waged a ruthless campaign across Yemen, assassinating rivals, recruiting child soldiers, launching drone attacks against Saudi Arabia, Israel, and US warships.
بعون الله تعالى نجحت الصناعات العسكرية في القوات المسلحة اليمنية من إنتاج صواريخ بحرية متطورة.
Since October 7th, they have launched over 100 attacks against commercial shipping. They fired crewed drones, anti-ship ballistic missiles, making history as the first force ever to launch ballistic missiles at American warships.
That's right, John. Multiple times U.S. warships came under ballistic missile attack in the Red Sea and off the coast of Yemen in the Gulf of Aden. And just for context, that has never happened in world history. Ballistic missiles have never been launched at U.S. warships before.
Thankfully, every missile was shot down. But Pentagon officials feared, what if just one got through?
The Houthis launched anti-ship ballistic missiles and crewed drones at the American warships. None were successful and all were shot down. And just a few days ago, Houthis leader said attacks would resume against shipping in the Red Sea, including Israeli ships.
Vital shipping lanes, lifelines for global commerce and oil trade, were choked off. Commercial ships were forced to reroute around Africa, driving up costs and fueling global economic instability.
He had a message to the Houthis. It says, quote, "Your time is up and your attacks must stop starting today. If they don't, hell will rain down upon you like never before." And to Iran, support for the Houthi terrorists must end immediately.
And so, Operation Rough Rider was born. But before Operation Rough Rider was born in fire, President Trump tried diplomacy, back channels, warnings, private messages, all of it ignored. In fact, even before Trump took the oath again, President Joe Biden had tried to curb the chaos. Starting in January 2024, under Biden's command, the United States and the United Kingdom launched a calculated wave of strikes against the Houthis, over 260 attacks by year's end. The Biden administration tread carefully, targeting limited sites, aiming to avoid civilian casualties, and hoping not to reignite Yemen's bloody civil war. But the Houthis were undeterred. The Red Sea burned, and the missiles kept flying. Trump had seen enough.
President Trump announcing the strikes just a few minutes ago on his Truth Social, saying, quote, "Joe, today I have ordered the United States military to launch decisive and powerful military action against the Houthi terrorists in Yemen."
We're doing the entire world a favor by getting rid of these guys and their ability to strike global shipping. Under Trump's renewed leadership, the gloves were off. Key Houthi commanders were wiped out in no time. Missile sites were also wiped from the map. And Mark Rubio made it clear, this mission will continue until their ability to threaten global shipping is destroyed. General Kurilla, head of U.S. forces in the Middle East, had been itching to strike. And when he got full presidential backing, he unleashed hell.
These are the most significant airstrikes since President Trump returned to the White House, and the first time U.S. jets have struck these Iranian-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen since President Trump returned to the White House.
And Trump wasn't alone. Israel joined the battle, launching airstrikes on Houthi strongholds across Yemen's west coast.
The target, an oil terminal in Ras Isa, north of the port city of Hodeidah. The US military says it is targeting the Houthis' main source of revenue, oil. The Houthis say dozens of people have been killed. The attack happened on Thursday, and most of the pictures from it are too graphic to show.
Meanwhile, the Houthis refused to back down. They also had their own message for the US and its allies. Their military operations will continue, the leaders declared, as long as the genocide in Gaza persists. With joint attacks from the US and Israel, the Houthis took a major hit and now they've vowed revenge. They promised new attacks on Israeli ships in the Gulf of Aden and the Red Sea, blaming Israel for blocking humanitarian aid to Gaza. And though no major strikes have been reported so far, the threat still hangs heavy over the region. The Red Sea, once a vital artery for global commerce, now lies crippled. Merchant ships flee the region, choking trade routes and sending oil prices spiraling. Gulf Arab nations, longtime US allies, now find themselves trapped between the rising flames and the collapsing economy. Their oil fields, once untouchable, now stand exposed to Houthi revenge. And the Houthis know exactly where to strike: oil, the lifeblood of power.
Right, because I read that one of the goals is to target their weapons storage facilities, which are reportedly deep underground. So they're going to be using those bunker busters and probably repeatedly to try to get to those warehouses that are essentially buried.
But so does the US.
A brutal series of US airstrikes kills tens and injures more at Yemen's Ras Isa oil port. The death toll is high and will get higher.
But the story of the war and violence between the US, Yemen, and Iran didn't start now. To understand how it all culminated in the unfortunate day the skies above Yemen caught fire, you have to go back almost a century.
One of his rare appearances, Mohammad Mossadegh, Premier of Iran, meets the press to reaffirm his government's unwillingness to arbitrate with Britain over nationalizing the Anglo-Iranian oil company.
In 1951, Iran's Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, nationalized the country's oil fields, breaking the iron grip of Western companies. In response, the United States and Britain orchestrated a covert operation, a coup d'etat.
So shortly after his election, the CIA began to plan his overthrow, teaming up with Britain's MI6.
Mossadegh was overthrown. A pro-Western Shah was installed. Iran's democracy dismantled.
Now, the CIA, we've seen it spelling out its involvement in a series of newly declassified documents. These are the actual documents marked confidential, top secret, eyes only. It's the stuff of crime and mystery and spy novels.
For decades, the Shah ruled with an iron fist, backed by American money and American weapons. But resentment burned beneath the surface. In 1979, it exploded, and the Iranian Revolution swept the Shah from power.
A tearful Shah of Iran left his country today on a vacation from which he may never return. And for the first time since violent anti-Shah protests began in Iran more than a year ago, there were celebrations in the streets of Tehran.
A theocratic regime rose in his place, led by Ayatollah Khomeini, built on hatred of the West. That same year, Iranian militants stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, taking 52 Americans hostage for 444 days.
The American Embassy in Tehran is in the hands of Muslim students tonight. Spurred on by an anti-American speech by the Ayatollah Khomeini, they stormed the embassy, fought the Marine Guards for 3 hours, overpowered them, and took dozens of American hostages.
From that moment on, America and Iran were locked in a quiet war, a war of sabotage. Proxy battles and blood spilled far from their own borders.
Bodies and pieces of bodies were everywhere. Screams of those injured or trapped were barely audible at first as our minds struggled to grapple with the reality before us.
Through the 1980s and beyond, Iran armed and trained militant groups across the Middle East: Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen. Wherever chaos erupted, Iranian fingerprints were not far behind.
Iran-backed groups form a land bridge across the Middle East and connect in an alliance that Tehran calls the Axis of Resistance. Its focus? To oppose the West.
The United States, in turn, hit back. Sanctions, cyber warfare, covert operations. In 2020, a U.S. drone strike killed Qasem Soleimani, Iran's most powerful general, outside Baghdad airport.
Soleimani became famous in the West over the past decade or so because Iran decided to elevate his profile as the mastermind, the architect behind this modern iteration of the Axis of Resistance.
Iranians took to the street to protest the assassination of one of its strongest leaders. Iran vowed revenge and tensions only grew, and they kept to their word. Now, Iran's proxies, like the Houthis, choke vital trade routes, launch missiles at American warships, and fire drones at Israel. So Operation Rough Rider wasn't born in a vacuum. It's the latest move in a bloody chess game, decades in the making, and the stakes have never been higher. But while America and Iran traded blows across the decades, a new battleground was slowly brewing in a country torn by poverty, rebellion, and blood.
One of the problems that has now turned the Houthis into a really strong militia is that the war has taught them a lot. I mean, the Houthis are a quick study.
Yemen, the forgotten corner of the Middle East, a nation where superpowers waged shadow wars, while its people were crushed in the crossfire. After the Gulf War, America's presence in the Middle East grew. Military bases, alliances, arms deals. But in Yemen, U.S. influence was met with suspicion and hatred.
At 11:18 a.m., there was a thunderous explosion. You could feel all 505 feet and 8,400 tons of guided missile destroyer suddenly and violently thrust up and to the right.
In 2000, that hatred turned deadly. Al-Qaeda terrorists operating in Yemen's lawless waters bombed the USS Cole, killing 17 American sailors. It was a chilling warning. Yemen was slipping beyond control, and after 9/11, the US unleashed the war on terror. They used drone strikes, special operations, secret prisons, and Yemen became another front line. But America's heavy hand sowed seeds of resentment deep into Yemeni soil. As Yemen's government collapsed into corruption and weakness, the Houthis, a Shiite rebel group, rose.
The fact that nobody's heard of the Houthis is either you haven't been paying attention for a decade, or you just, I mean, it's hard not to know who the Houthis are.
But where is Iran in all of this? Steeped in the shadows of the bloody conflict, the architects behind the chaos, the invisible hand fueling a proxy war that stretches from Gaza to the Red Sea.
Axis of resistance works in the Middle East. We have Iran over here, and then, of course, Hamas in Gaza over here on the Mediterranean. Iran's most important militia ally is Hezbollah here in Lebanon. And then finally, they also have an alliance with the Houthis in Yemen down here south.
For years, Tehran armed the Houthis, the fierce warriors of Islam's Shiite Zaydi sect, a dynasty that once ruled Yemen for 1,000 years. Now, they're back, with Iranian missiles on their shoulders and blood in their eyes.
One of Iran's aims in the Middle East is to always keep the fight, the military fight, as far away from its own borders as possible. And the presence of these military allies in the land bridge kind of helps it do that.
Tehran, of course, denies everything. They deny the crates of smuggled missiles. They deny the captured drones. They deny the weapons experts have traced back straight to Iranian factories.
Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei said immediately after the attack that Iran did not have a hand in planning it, but supported it.
But the evidence is undeniable. Iran has violated UN arms embargoes, daring the world to stop them, while pretending their fingerprints aren't all over the battlefield. The Houthis now stand as Iran's fiercest weapon in what Tehran calls the Axis of Resistance, an axis that has been said to be crumbling. After Hamas's October 7th triggered Israel's brutal war in Gaza, much of Iran's network was shattered. Hezbollah in Lebanon, battered. Hamas in Gaza, bleeding. And in Iraq, Iran's Shiite militias have gone silent, their leaders hiding underground after U.S. retaliation killed 3 American soldiers and wounded dozens more. but not the Houthis.
The number 2 leader in ISIS had been killed in an American drone strike. We have some video footage, as you can see there. That happened in western Iraq yesterday. And John, these airstrikes against the Iranian-backed Houthi rebels were meant to send a message to Tehran as well to stop their support for the Houthi rebels.
In a region drenched in fire and blood, they remain Tehran's sharpest blade, striking at Israel and bleeding American power. Between November 2023 and January this year, the Red Sea became a graveyard. The Houthis unleashed a brutal campaign, launching over 100 attacks on merchant vessels. Missiles and drones rained down, sinking 2 ships into the icy depths and killing 4 sailors caught in the crossfire. Their leaders boasted of the bloodshed, calling it a righteous war to end Israel's assault on Gaza. But behind the slogans, something darker stirred. Their sudden rise in the Arab world masked a sinister truth: human rights abuses, ruthless crackdowns on dissent, aid workers who have been imprisoned or worse, silenced forever. In the chaos of war, the Houthis found their greatest weapon, not missiles, but the world's distraction. Given the brutal war already tearing Yemen apart, you might wonder, why would the Houthis provoke the United States again? The answer lies in Gaza.
Since the war in Gaza started, Houthi rebels have attacked ships and fired missiles towards Israel. The group says it will stop when there is a ceasefire. President Trump has warned hell will rain down on them if they don't.
In October of 2023, a new war erupted between Israel and Hamas. Israeli airstrikes pounded Gaza. Hamas militants fired rockets deep into Israeli cities. The Middle East, which was already a powder keg, exploded in fury. Across the Arab world, outrage ignited. From the capitals of the Middle East to the refugee camps of Yemen, cries of solidarity with the Palestinians echoed through the streets. The Houthis, backed by Iran and fueled by fury, vowed revenge. They declared that attacks on Israel and anyone allied with it would continue until the siege of Gaza ended.
We maintain that our military operations will continue as long as the genocide in Gaza persists and the siege on its people remains, despite the sacrifices we are prepared to make.
Since the Gaza war began, the Houthis have launched a relentless campaign, firing missiles toward Israel, attacking U.S. and allied ships in the Red Sea, blockading Israeli commercial vessels. Their message was clear: the suffering of Gaza would not go unanswered. Washington responded with fury.
Here, a young boy watches it all, in shock. More than 100 people were injured. The Houthis say they will continue to fight.
Deadly U.S. airstrikes hammered Yemen's critical infrastructure, including the Ras Isa oil port, a vital lifeline for millions.
The port is a vital and irreplaceable lifeline for Yemen, according to the United Nations. Despite the high death toll, analysts say this will not stop the Houthis from attacking Israel in solidarity with the Palestinian cause.
Local TV channels called it pure U.S. aggression. Protesters flooded the streets of Yemen's battered capital, rallying not just against Israel, but now against America too.
In the capital Sana'a, people protest against the war in Gaza and against the US airstrikes. This nation has endured a lot, and now its Houthi rebels are President Trump's latest target.
The Houthis, bloodied but defiant, declared they would fight on, but the US wasn't backing down either. The Houthis were costing them money and valuable trade opportunities, and Trump vowed to wipe them out before he let that happen.
It's the deadliest attack since the US escalated strikes in January against what it says are Houthi military targets. However, this was a working oil facility and civilian workers were on site. They make up most of the dead.
But the Houthis did not stop. In fact, the battle only intensified.
A drone fired from Yemen is taken down by a French ship. It's part of the mission, patrolling the Red Sea to protect commercial shipping lanes.
President Trump, determined to crush the rebellion, warned that if attacks continued, they would also continue to fight back against the Houthis.
Trump team looks like they want to degrade the Houthi capabilities. In terms of the intensity of the strikes, the number of strikes, and how far and wide they're distributed across the northern parts of Yemen,
Trump's team launched a relentless campaign, pounding Houthi targets across Yemen with waves of airstrikes, aiming to shatter Iran's proxy force once and for all. The strategy was to cripple the Houthis before they have the chance to cause irreparable damage to global trade, destroy their revenue sources, and eventually cripple their will to fight. But each bomb dropped, each civilian death, only fueled the Houthis' narrative that the war in Gaza was the world's war.
They targeted a civilian site over there. As you can see, the casualties are all civilians that work at this facility.
Those lucky to survive were being treated, often in the most basic way.
The battlefields of Gaza, the Red Sea, and Yemen are bleeding into one another, a web of rage, grief, and vengeance binding the region together, pulling superpowers deeper into a war they may no longer be able to control. Operation Rough Rider was meant to end the threat, but instead, it may have shattered the fragile balance holding the Middle East together. The Houthis are bloodied, but alive. Iran is still watching, and the storm clouds are gathering. Can the US and its allies crush Iran's shadow armies before the next war ignites? Or have we just lit the match? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you'd like to stay updated on the trouble brewing in the Middle East and what that means for the US, check out this other video.